welcome everybody to another edition of Hot Program. I am your host with the most, all the way from the East Coast. And as always, folks, I am in airplane mode, and I am joined by a man who would not buy a product from Asus if it was made by Jesus, a man who needs no introduction. How are you doing today, my one black friend?
I am very well, thank you so much, and extremely excited about today's show.
Yes, let's hope I'm hoping for the best, because we're doing the reaction thing, and when you're doing the reaction thing, you haven't seen it, so we don't know what's in store for us.
We don't know what's in store, but I love answering people's tough questions because it brings them peace and relief, or it disturbs the crap out of them. That can be tough for all of us, but I just, I love letting people know, there's an answer, and it's not the crap you thought.
I kind of I don't know what we should call it, but it feels like horse betting or something. Sort of the idea of I like to predict where people are going with certain things and then see if they go where I predicted them to go.
I am someone who has actually taken care of horses. And so I've distributed a lot of horse betting in my life. Yeah.
Awesome.
Best job I ever had.
All right. Well, we are in the cafe and gather. If you want to come hang out and be a part of the show, just pop up on stage. Otherwise, just come link up with the gang. All right, let's jump into this and see how it goes. What?
Oh, you got the African guy in here?
Hello, everyone. I'm Professor Plank. I respond to various theological and ideological questions and claims from a rationalistic and naturalistic approach in an effort to give and explain the opposite viewpoint and help to balance the conversation. Today's video comes to us from a channel called Inspired Walk, who have come up with 10 questions the atheists cannot answer. It really would behoove them to call it something more appropriate, like 10 questions for atheists, or even 10 questions atheists will not like, or something like that. Something that would actually apply to these questions. Because I'm not the first, or even the 50th atheist who's tackled these questions. And tons more can and have done so just without putting it into a video format. I find that there are very few questions directed at atheists that we actually can't answer. More like the theists just don't like the answers we tend to give. Our answers don't follow their playbook of God did all these things, and so they take our answers as basic non-replies. 5 seconds after we've given them an answer, they forget it entirely and assume that we have no answers at all to give. So attempting to answer them here may be just shout.
Okay, so Professor Plink here makes a very good point, and I think sometimes the question is a diversion. They don't actually want an answer to the question. They just don't want to hear our side of the argument that disproves their side of the argument, which is why the answer doesn't matter, because they want to continue in the thought vein that they already have. I find these videos are probably generally very insincere. And why I say that is that their questions can seem insincere. It would be wonderful to see someone say, here's what the answer to this question would mean to me, because here's how it would change how I see whatever. In this case, it's their faith, right? It would change how they view their faith practice. It would change how they view the Bible. Like all those people who think the King James is the best version of the Bible, when you tell them it's not, they don't change their mind. They just think you're wrong, right? You'll probably have 3% that are willing to change their mind based on hearing that, oh, it's made from less reliable and newer manuscripts than things being translated now. We found more manuscripts. That will actually mean something to some people, but to most people that think the King James is the definitive Bible, it will not register with them. It will not have the value that you could hope it would from someone who's actually open to a true understanding of that material and the material world at hand. Thank you. Please resume.
Shouting into the void, at least in regards to any theists who may see my responses, but hope springs eternal that something might get through the Jesus haze and end up sticking in their minds. So let's have at it and give these 10 questions a listen.
Do you really believe that science is the only answer to all of life's questions?
Certainly not. Science can't tell me what I should get my parents for their upcoming wedding anniversary. Science can't let me know whether or not my nephew did a good job in his Little League game. Science can't tell me when or if they're ever going to get around to making Buckaroo Banzai versus the World Crime League while Peter Weller is still alive. Look, there are plenty of questions in life that science is ill-equipped to answer. But if you're looking for answers regarding things like the origins of the cosmos, the relationship between matter and energy, how atoms bond together to do all of the amazing things that they do, the origins of life, diversification of life, how the weather works, what the stars are, the movement of the planets, and if you seek real knowledge of how everything in the world around us functions, then yeah, science is how you get to that. Theology, mysticism, superstition, these things don't get you anywhere except lost in the dark, wondering why the light of your torch went out, even though you invoked the name of the fire spirits to keep it going.
If God doesn't exist, why do you care if people worship him?
I want this one.
There are currently 6 states in the U.S. that do not teach evolution in their schools because of pressure from evangelical.
Did you want me to pause it? Yeah.
Yeah, I just saw the raise my hand button today. I didn't know.
Oh, okay.
I didn't know that was a thing before. I would see all those things down there, and like I don't know why any of that's there for me. Sure. Now this is a very important question this man asks. So if a God exists, if no God exists, why do we care if people still worship him? If no God exists and people still worship him, we have some people not embracing reality. They're embracing a delusion that can be harmful to them in many ways. Now, let's focus on the Bible here, because that's often where this guy is coming from. He's coming from a biblical perspective. If the God of the Bible isn't real, then all those sacrifices people had been making over centuries, be it giving up their own, resources their family needed, like goats and sheep and cows, so that they can be slaughtered and then barbecued to please some God that isn't even there. That was a waste of resources. They could have gone to profit the family. They could have gone to feed starving people, things like that. Nowadays, we can see in the Bible where Jesus says, hey, store up your treasures or the Bible says, store up your treasures in heaven. And, don't worry about tomorrow. Tomorrow will worry about itself. The Bible says things like this. Well, if you're not saving, you could be in trouble. Like for a long time, I wasn't saving because I thought, oh, well, Jesus is going to come back and I won't need the money, blah, 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 blah. Well, that isn't the case. And that's a mistake. Better that money sits in a bank account accruing 1% interest, or I bought some investment properties or something like that. Better that I gave it to a homeless person so that they could eat, or bought a home for someone else, something like that. Those resources are often better used now, down here, as opposed to shoveling money to Kenneth Copeland and his ilk, who aren't going to do anything for another person with it other than buy something from them. They're not trying to help make the world a better place. They're not. It's profitable, right? It's profitable. It's all about making money. And if millions of people, like my mother, we recently discovered that she's been sending part of her fixed income to televangelists who don't need the money. God, as I say on this show, God never keeps a dime. It would be better if she had that for her own comfort, to make her own environment, her apartment nicer or whatever, that she can help out a friend, or maybe someone who's helped out her, if those resources were there. So that's why I would say the belief in a God, if it is indeed not real, is a waste. The ideas in the Bible about hatred, right? Oh, you're not supposed to like the behavior of this group, behavior of that group, the behavior of these cultures over here, that society, screw those Canaanites, kill all those Amalekites. If there's no God, all that commanded human hatred goes away. All that carrying out vengeance on behalf of the divine goes away. Wouldn't we not have all been smarter throughout the centuries to say, well, God, if you don't like it, you fix it. Don't ask me to fix it. I'm not all powerful. You can fix it without hurting anyone. You can fix it without anyone becoming in need. And if you have the better way, don't leave it up to us. Do it yourself. That's not what we see. Really, a lot of what we see in these holy books is the political will of the people in charge. They're telling you what they want, right? It's a scam.
Absolutely.
It really is a scam. But there are people who have, sincere people who have that hope for a better tomorrow, not one that they make alone, but one that they use the strength and power of that God that's supposed to be up there or in this tube of lotion or in this pen or whatever you got, the God that permeates all things, however you want to see it. But that God is supposed to play a part, a vital part, to get that person through the process, right? Or to make it happen all around them so that they can marvel at the wonders of the Almighty God. But it doesn't work that way. So that's why that's dangerous, because you have people not going to doctors. You have parents waiting, they're praying over their children, their church is praying over their children, when it would just be a $350 copay to heal their kid, but the kid dies because Jesus didn't heal him. Well, God just wanted another angel in heaven. So for me, I say to that person, you killed your kid and God is a poor manager of resources. If there is one. He doesn't handle his resources well. He does not need another angel in heaven. So we have a society that perpetuates, in my opinion, the naive view that there is a divine being up there running the whole show. As the Psalms say, right? God is determining man's steps. A man can make his own plans, but it is God that determines his steps. How awful is that? We're no better. I'm sure some of you have seen that picture on the first video I made for my channel. It's me and my little brother. We're laying on our bellies playing with action figures. Well, that's how God works, if that is the case. We're just action figures, dolls for a God with too much free time and being so unwilling to make the world a better place because he's too busy making it awful. So anyway, that's my spiel. There'll be more.
Yeah. All right. Let's get to it. Let's just do it.
Evangelical creationist groups and their lobbying efforts. This includes a state where I have family with young children being raised. There are places not giving their young people a proper education and are starting them off severely disadvantaged because of religious dogma. Missouri just passed a resolution to limit gender-affirming care to both children and adults, which is just one example of...
I want to pull this back a second because I want to hear the statistic.
If people worship him.
There are
why do we
currently
care?
6 states in the U.S. that do not
Why do we care if people worship God?
teach evolution in their schools.
Okay, and then there's 6 states that don't teach evolution. Got it.
Because of pressure from evangelical creationist groups and their lobbying efforts. This includes a state where I have family with young children being raised. There are places not giving their young people a proper education and are starting them off severely disadvantaged because of religious dogma. Missouri just passed a resolution to limit gender-affirming care to both children and adults, which is just one example of a myriad of similar proposals, laws, and bans targeting the trans community, at least in part because of religious notions that God created man and woman and he doesn't make mistakes. Historic anti-LGBTQ legislation, apostasy laws, hate crimes perpetrated by one religious group against another, shunning of the deconverted, rejection of medical treatment by fundamentalist organizations, particularly...
Good.
Okay. So, I'm going to quote Ezekiel 20:25. I'm going to give you context by starting in 24 and going to 26. When he talks about these laws that clearly religious people are putting forward, right? Because they want a theocracy. I think you should read the whole book before you commit to a theocracy. There's 613 commandments, not 10, right? But this is an admission in the Bible that there's a problem, that the God of the Bible put a problem in there. And there may be some way of how to resolve it, but they got to acknowledge there's the problem there. And in my view, a lot of the planned hatred we see against like trans people, gay people, this ethnicity, foreign people trying to get into this country and all that stuff, it should all go away. It should all go away. And we need to use our brains, right, to figure out what we should be doing. We should use our brains to figure out, hey, maybe this sort of behavior shouldn't be tolerable. Instead of me barking about how many trans people or who's drinking a Bud Light or whatever, maybe it's more important that we get the pedophiles out of the church. If I'm Johnny Christian, maybe that's more important. But Johnny Christian probably knows you're freaking powerless. You'll never fix that problem. So they just gripe about other things that they'll also never fix. So anyway, Ezekiel chapter 20, verse 24, because they had not executed my judgments, but had despised my statutes and had polluted my Sabbath in their eyes after their fathers' idols. Therefore, I also gave them statutes that were not good, and judgments whereby they should not live. And I polluted them in their own gifts, in that they caused to pass through the fire all who openeth the womb, that I might make them desolate to the end, that they might know that I am the Lord. So, okay. So what the Bible's God is saying in verse 25, because he didn't like the way that they didn't follow everything he said, he gave them statutes that were not good and judgments by where they should not live. So maybe some of these laws they're trying to pass and passing today are based on those statutes. Do you really want to kill a person for working on a Sabbath? Is that really fair? Do you really want to kill adulterers? Is that really fair? And so on and so on and so on, right? So again, judgments by where they should not live. And so God is so offended by all of this that he makes a rule that they have to kill some of their children, their firstborn children. This is in the Bible. I'm not editorializing. This is in the Bible. And in case you want to challenge someone, hey, can you explain this to me? Ezekiel 20, chapter 20, verses 24 through 26. I have rarely put this before a Christian who would give me an answer that was something other than, well, God does that for a reason sufficient to him. This ought to be despicable in the eyes of everyone who hears it. This really ought to shock and horrify Christians that this is the way their God thinks, if their God is indeed real. This is his process, one of vengeance.
Right. Absolutely.
Right? Well, God is merciful.
Mm-hmm.
Well, if you do everything he says, he's merciful. If you don't, he's probably going to try to crack your head open like an egg, or kill your kid, or have you killed, something like that. He's definitely got a plan that is rather nasty, right, in his reaction. But go ahead.
No, I'm with you. I just wanted to add, because I want to make sure we try to get through these, but like actually, remember what the question is. And I feel a little bit bad because it would have been nice to be predictive and before we saw what they say. But I guess to add in this case, and I'll try to do that going forward. It's freaking scary. One of the reasons, so I'm trying to address the question of, like, as an atheist, why do I care if people worship God? It's because it scares the shit out of me. To me, God is a moral monster, right? God is the, genociding and, sacrifice my own son. You sacrifice your son. Hey, I was just kidding. There's a word for this. I can't remember what it is. But yeah, it's just the idea that it's the idea that God is a moral monster. Therefore, you have an obligation not to worship God. And anybody who does, you really actually really want to provide some serious pushback to, because I fundamentally think that worshiping, like, even if God is not real, right? Even if God is, it'd be like worshiping Voldemort. I'd be like, it's pretty immoral to worship Voldemort. I don't think Voldemort's a real character, but you are worshiping something evil. And so, yeah, that's just part of my opposition to, part of my answer to the question, right? Like, in addition to agreeing with what they said and everything you said.
On behalf of their children. All of these things, not only in the U.S., but abroad in many places where it can be significantly worse. I mean, I could go on and on and on about the absolutely horrific damage that dogmatic attachment to religion, including sects of Christianity, have done and are currently doing to countless people. When people are forced to comply with religious-based mandates that have the force of law behind them upon punishment of arrest or prosecution, that is why I care. When people are disowned by their families for being born in a way that the parents' antiquated beliefs say is sinful, that is why I care. When the general forward progress of science, technology, gender equality, social equity, and cultural stability is held back because of attachment to religious fundamentalism, making life worse for everyone in ways too innumerable to even fully realize, that is why I care. Now, stop making me be all serious and on a soapbox. Let me get back to making dick jokes and Simpson references, which is where my heart truly lies.
Seriously.
Can I answer somebody's question, Pocket Locker?
Go ahead.
Forgive me, I'm not used to looking at the chat this way. Liz Allen commented, "Isn't the preacher working on the Sabbath? To me, being dragged to church to listen to Reverend Windbag, leaving me too brain dead the rest of the day." That is my answer to quoted, and then I can't see.
Oh, the question of the day was, have you had experience with toxic behavior that claims to be love? I misspelled it, but yeah.
Okay, well, I'm glad you know. So the priest has to work on the Sabbath because they're sort of taking care of business of God. So that's okay. That's permitted. But it's the rest of us we're supposed to rest. And it's not supposed to be a heavy day for the priest either, as far as I've read. But yeah, it's an interesting thing. I like the Reverend Windbag comments because I think I've sat through a few sermons that were sleep-inducing. But yeah, interesting. Sorry, go ahead.
No, that's fine. All right, and this question, I guess let's address this next question before we hear what they respond with the, can nothing create something? That is just simply not the claim. right?
Well, I think Lawrence Krauss did no one any favors by saying nothing.
Right.
That nothing is where everything came from, and then going ahead and explain all these quantum details, right? I think he might as well have named it Susan, and because that would be more clear to people. I think he managed to confuse the very simple-minded and a lot of intelligent people as well. People in his field know what he's talking about, but colloquially, he's speaking nonsense. But anyone who sits down and listens to him at length will, okay, I see where he's coming from. They'll be able to easily interpret what he's saying. But a proper response to this, or a common response to this question is, well, you say God created everything out of nothing, right? He just spoke it into being. What were his materials? There are those that would tell you that in Genesis, God is taking the body of I don't want to say Leviathan or Nehushtan, I forget which one it is, and making the world from that. So without form and void doesn't mean there was no material there. There was something there. So anyway, go ahead, Bakalaka. You can go ahead. Play.
Yeah, and yeah. Let's see where they take this, but I think we're on the same page, and I totally agree with you about the point about Krauss's title. But at the same time, he was clearly just trying to sell books, right? And at the same time, also trying to, you know what I mean? Like he was trying
he's focusing on the amount of energy in the universe. That's really where he's coming from.
Yes.
When you look at the amount of energy in the universe, that's where the idea comes from.
Yeah.
But that's not how most people most people aren't taking it.
I guess right? All I'm saying is I agree with the point about what he's saying, but I'm just trying to acknowledge as well that people of good faith don't normally have an issue in understanding it so much as that we're wishing he would have been more sensitive to the way that particular language was going to be misused.
Right. I go back to the Steve Allen quote. Why can't he convince the dummy? Yeah.
Yeah. All right, here we go.
Create something.
For the last time, yes! You totally ignorant of physics numbskull! Look, I don't expect your average theist to be completely boned up on the up-to-date findings of quantum physicists. But if you're going to insist on constantly making this question a cornerstone of your attempts to put atheists on the defensive, you might try Googling the question even once. And honestly, you as a theist should be happy that something can, in fact, come from nothing. Because as a theist, and as a Christian specifically, your creationist belief is predicated on God creating everything from nothing. So, congratulations! At least this one part of your belief system is plausible. Very little of the rest of it is, but at least you have the something can come from nothing part of it. But why do you insist on attributing the something from nothing argument to atheists and then mock it like it's a silly notion? We don't believe in creation ex nihilo in general. You do. It says in Romans 4:17, "As it is written, I have made you a father of many nations. He is our father in the sight of God, in whom he believed, the God who gives life to the dead and calls into being things that were not." So God creates things out of nothing in your belief. Something from nothing. It's a primarily creationist position. But again, hey, it is possible to get something from nothing. So you might want to stop saying it with such disdain.
If you've never been to the ends of the earth, if you've never been to every planet, if you've never been to every part of the universe, how do you know that God doesn't exist?
What exactly are the ends of the earth?
Yeah, go ahead. I was gonna actually wait on this one, but go ahead. I don't know why, but yeah, go for it. I'll wait on mine. Go ahead.
I've done some traveling to very religious countries, in fact. But yeah, so he asks a good question, and I used to joke. I did some stand-up comedy for a little while. One of my joke was I built a spaceship and I've traveled the entire universe because I really wanted to see if Hooters had the worst customer service in the universe, and they do. Um, this is a lot like that joke, this question. It's a silly notion to go everywhere and look under every rock and under every tree, right? And I am aware of what the Gospel of Thomas says, by the way. It is silly for him to think that a person would do that. Now, the Bible gives us testable ways that we can know that God exists, right? We can read the whole thing and it'll tell us God is supposed to prosper us if we give our tithe. There's supposed to be more of this overflow of wealth and prosperity than we can handle. That isn't the case, is it? The end of the Gospel of Mark says that followers of Jesus will be able to lay their hands on people and they shall get well. They should be able to drink deadly poison and live. They should be able to take up snakes and live. So let's not present anyone with an opportunity to be hurt. Let's forget it says anything about poison. Let's forget it says anything about taking up serpents. Let's just focus on the one thing that's really powerful that's there. And that's them to be able to lay hands on the sick and the sick get well. We know that fails. We know that fails.
If anything, they might just get sick themselves.
They might just get sick themselves. Yeah, if it's a virus, they could easily get that virus themselves. We saw that when people went to church, right, during the virus, right? People went to church and got sick because of contact they had in church. Is God looking out for you if that is the case? My neighbor who passed away from the virus, his mother got sick with it and he went to take care of her. This is a church-going guy, right? The Bible will say, hey, look after the sick. That's what he was doing. And then he got sick, and inside of 2 weeks, it turned his lungs to jelly, basically. I think, again, this goes back to a previous question this man had about why do we care? The simple fact is he's believing in something that doesn't work on a grand scale, but what may be taking place, why people get so defensive about this topic of their Christian faith and that their God is real, is because to some degree, Pocket Locker, it works for them. And they think that's what's doing it. Like I'll try to pair it with I have an old car. It does everything a new car would do pretty much. So do I need a new car? So within their faith practice, even though it's based on false assumptions, it does everything the truth does for the most part. There's a few things my car doesn't have, like lane keeping assist, and it doesn't drive itself, and so on and so on and so on. But it does mostly everything the brand new fancy car does with all the options. I can't go 200 miles an hour unless you drop it from space, maybe. But other than that, it's pretty good. It's pretty much the same. And I think that's where this guy ought to realize he's coming from. It does, his faith beliefs enable him to live to function in a world that is based on truth and reality. And there's enough overlap that he doesn't see a need for something new. The way he looks at it through that lens, right? Through those lenses, is the world is the way his book tells him it is. There's nothing new under the sun. Well, we have space travel now. We have cars. Earthlings do. That's under this particular sun. They didn't have those things back then. We had VCRs. They didn't have those back then.
Mm.
We have cell phones. They didn't have those back then. But there's nothing new under the sun. Ecclesiastes rings true. But it isn't. It isn't true.
Right. For me, the way I can show that there's no God, and I do, we'll play this, but the reason I'm going to wait is because I actually think this is a really interesting question. But for people that don't know, like, I am a hard atheist in the sense that I am genuinely confident, almost more confident than anything in the world, or as confident as I could be, let's say, about anything else I accept to just be a plain fact, that there's no God. And that's hard for me to realization to come to as a former believer. But the reasoning is just quite simply that the origin of all gods is the human imagination. It's coming to that realization, like, if there were no people, would there still be trees? Yes. If there were no people, would there still be frogs? Yes. If there were people, would there still be gods? Absolutely not. Mm-hmm. And so I think we have enough data collected to suggest that there's that these mythical beings don't exist, and also we've modeled the way enough of the way the universe and world works without the need to appeal to fictional creatures. And similarly, I have no hope that down the road we should leave room open, because down the road we may discover that dragons are actually responsible for everything. To me, God's no different. It's just a fictional character. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh, all right. You ready to go?
Well. Let me provide a look.
Ahead.
Let me offer one more test.
Sure.
So, if there is a God at all anywhere in the universe, to any beings that exist in the universe, I now petition that God, and because that God is just, right, and reliable, that God will come through. Tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, every child in every children's hospital and in their own bedrooms, if they're there, that are sick, will be healed. If there is a God, that God will see to it that happens. In addition, all military conflicts, all political conflicts, all wars will immediately also end at 9 a.m. Pacific Standard Time tomorrow. Right?
Yeah.
So it's 2023 right now. I couldn't be the first person with this idea. It's not possible. I think we're fairly certain that regardless of how much faith any of us had, that isn't going to come true.
Right.
And I will stipulate, my faith is not a factor as to whether or not that God will initiate that process and bring about those things. I don't have to believe. I just have to ask. So there we go. The process has begun. If there is a real God somewhere, tomorrow's going to be a really amazing day for really wonderful reasons.
Please tell me you're not a flat earther and you believe in an ice wall. The Earth doesn't have ends. It's an oblate spheroid. But the point is about not having been everywhere. The claim being that if you haven't been everywhere in existence, haven't seen everything there is to see, then how can you know God doesn't exist? This is a rather silly question. What, God's hiding on the dark side of the moon or something, and since we haven't been there, how can I say that he isn't hiding up there? What if I had been everywhere? What if our technology advanced to the point where we could, at our command, observe and examine any and every part of the entire cosmos? Then you just claim divine hiddenness. The God's invisible. ethereal, untouchable, and undetectable so long as he doesn't want to be detected. So don't be obtuse.
May I
The
interrupt?
fact that we haven't been everywhere is in no way a reason.
What's up, Sean?
Hey, Jay. Hey, Black. I love the old car analogy, by the way, Black, just because I have an old one. And but what it made me think of or go back to, and this might be something that really just like slapped me in the face while I was thinking about it, is obviously it doesn't do fuck all for them unless they stay in it, right? Like really stay in it. And for me, that's always been parallel to like drugs and booze, right? Like as an addict, you had to stay in it or the withdrawal was just fucking miserable, right? Like it's just terrible. But if you can break through that wall of withdrawal and get a few months out of it and get this, you're done. But if you're thick in it, right, whether it's 2 drinks a night or 12 or fucking blackout drunk, you're just constantly in it. And that's the only way you can really, like, that's the only way to stay, like, for me, to be an addict, to like stay in the booze or the drugs or whatever it was for that day, was to be full in it. Because every time I tried to come out, it was terrible. The tension was terrible. The withdrawals were terrible. It was just really terrible. Until finally I was able to like break through that wall, and it took a long time. But then once I was away from it, me personally, I never needed it. And that parallel to religion, because at least the Christians in my family and my friends, man, they are in it, dude. Every day it's reading the Bible. They wake up at 5:30 in the morning and start with prayer. They end with prayer. They fucking, 3-minute prayer before they eat every meal with the kids. Bible Sunday school or whatever the fucking vacation Bible school is, like all of this. Unless they're like, for me, when you guys were just talking and giving those examples, for me, it obviously is problematic for them in the sense that they have to stay in it. They have to stay on the belief to even remotely stay in it. They even still have doubts with reading the fucking book however many times a day. One friend of mine was like, I micro pray thousands of times a day. And
Micro pray.
He's like, yeah, dude, maybe that's a thing. Like I've heard a few of my friends say micro prayers. Like
that's awesome.
They've used the term or the verbiage, like the phrase micro prayers. And I was like, what in the fuck is wrong with you? This was when I was outside, I was thinking, how miserable is your fucking life that you're like every fucking thing you're praying about, right? Like because if you're doing this many prayers, but anyway, my point being is when I was listening to you guys, I often parallel it to the addiction, but I'd never paralleled it. Like I'd never thought about the way that Christians keep themselves in it, because if they get to, and I think this is by design, right? Like there are lots of people out there that are in the Christian or whatever fucking version they are, keeping people in it because they know if they get away from it too long, or if they don't go to church, most people, if they get out of church, they get out of the belief and they get a little farther and farther away from it, they're done. So obviously the goal is to keep everybody in it and keep it relevant in that sense, or at least in our neck of the woods. They go to church 3 times a week, right? And maybe that just came on me when you guys were talking. So
well,
I just
thank you. Thank you for commenting. And I would encourage anyone else to do the same. Don't go away. Don't go away. I really appreciate your comments, because you made me think about how much structure there is within this religion. And as part of that structure is the belief that if enough people fall away, they don't focus on, that means Jesus is coming back. Like Revelation said, the Bible says, the great falling away, and then Jesus is going to come back. It's that society will crumble under the weight of its own corruption. That people will be rotten to the core. Now let's go back to addiction, and maybe you can speak on this. When you had a victory, when you could put together, let's just say 10 good days, right? Was it your victory? Or was it did you feel you were sharing that victory? Conversely, when you couldn't put together 2 good days, did you feel it was solely your failure? If you could comment on those, please.
Yes. So at that time I wasn't religious. So I got, and this is a much longer story that I'll spare you for now. But after the addiction, I was always spiritual, but I never I didn't go to church, but I never attributed anything to Jesus, but I was definitely like Christian, Catholic, whatever. But I never attributed the way that people do up here. It wasn't until I moved up here that people knew, like, oh, well, he's speaking a little Christianese. Let's drag him into it. And by them dragging me into it, I completely came out of like everything that I ever believed. Otherwise, I just said, yeah, I'm Christian, whatever. But anyway, the long short of it is, when you mentioned that, the biggest thing that hits me, Black, is one of my good friends kept telling me that there's no way I could have gotten sober or clean without Jesus. And I was like, I don't know what you're talking about, because I never had that revelatory moment that you do. And he's like, well, if you're Christian or Catholic, then you've experienced that and you've felt the presence. And I was like, no, I've never felt that presence. I grew up going to church, a couple times we did this I was what do they call that? When you go to church on Christmas and at family events, and
a CEO Christian and Easter only. Maybe there's a different term, but that's the one I heard.
Right. But you're on that tips, as Jay likes to say. So I was on that. And when I came up here and started, Sarah and I started dating, we'd go to church every now and then because she liked it. And then we went a little bit more. And then they were like, oh, look, we can drag him into the fucking fundamentalism. But anyway, that being said, Black, so for me, 10 days was awesome. I went 3 months and then went back to it. And then luckily for me, I was scared out of it pretty badly from multiple hospital visits. Okay. So I was pretty scared about it. But there was a network of friends that helped, that I worked with, family a little bit, not so much. But there was no, I did it with a couple. The gym membership actually was my biggest support group. I got on a triathlon club with a bunch of people. And so that was my biggest support group, to help me through. If that answers the question, I'm not sure. That
does. And I appreciate you mentioning that other people played a part, because I think there's the mindset, as you stated, someone had the mindset, well, it must be the Holy Spirit kicking in or something like that, right? It has to be, from their perspective, their mechanisms entered your life and began working for you to help pull you out.
Can't be done without it, because
done without it.
Can't be. Yeah. And but up here, Black, a lot of people will talk about porn addiction, like sex addicts or porn addiction or some sort of addiction. And for me, as an actual addict, right? Like as somebody that was drinking himself to fucking death and using whatever when it was around, when I hear them talk about like their addiction quotations, man, that's just their Pauline narrative, right? That's just I was this terrible person and look at me now that I've got Jesus in my life. Because when they talk about like, I had a sex addiction, and you break it down and they're like, jerking off once a day to fucking, some Playboy next to the thing, or they go on and watch porn once a week. I'm like, that's not a fucking addiction, right? That's like in my world, that's nothing. Look, that's healthy, right? Like if you're jerking off a couple times a day as a 20-year-old male, that's fucking healthy. But anyway, all that aside, I don't think a lot of them understood addiction and what it is, because they're all told, in my experience, there are a lot of people that think they were addicts because the church is like, you're addicted to sex, you're addicted to alcohol, you're addicted to cigarettes.
Absolutely.
And they're like, shit, and for me, I've had this conversation, with somebody that just because he did some special K in college and ended up in the emergency room, he wasn't an addict. You're not a fucking drug addict. You right? You had a normal college experience. Unfortunately, a percentage of those go south, right? It's like a kid having a bad acid trip and saying he was a drug addict for 20 years. I'm like, you dropped acid once, dude. Give me a break. But because the way that they're brought up, because the church keeps them in this, you're addicted, and now look how much better you are with Jesus. But this goes into what you were talking about earlier, Black. They're not better. They get as many divorces as anybody else, if not more. They're fucking constantly in trouble doing whatever terrible shit they're doing. It doesn't look anything like there's a fucking Jesus or it's all love or it makes them any better than anybody else on the planet. And then when broached with that, they're like, well, you're just a sinner. We're all broken. I mean,
we're
anyway.
all broken. Again,
Yeah.
as I have said, and again, I appreciate your comments. As I have said, when the Bible was being put together, it was put together by some supremely, although not divine, intelligent human beings, because they accounted for all the problems that would still be going on. They managed to take credit for everything and take the blame for everything too, to keep God spotless and faultless.
So I think you're wrong in one sense.
Tell me.
I think it was all going on then. It was all going on then. These
I don't
people
disagree.
that were, one day science is gonna like be problematic, so we're gonna like put this in there. No, it was already problematic. Paul was literally like trying to get money so he could go fight the people preaching against him or preaching other gods or whatever it was. Like all of these things they were writing about. I think you're right. It's brilliant, right? It's done by the best, abusive, whatever you want to call it, like the abusive husbands out there of the time. But everything in it was already going on. All that pushback was already going on in their world. So they were just writing down their apologetics, but they were doing it, I think, like you said, very, very intelligent people were writing the best ways to combat the issues they were having. And we look at it now and they're like, look, it's foreshadowing all the problems we'd have because of science and because of brokenness and because of all this. No, it was already going on. People were already
going on.
Right. The earth is not fucking, 6,000 years old. It's not flat. It's not this. Like people were not as dumb as we like to think, or as Christians want us to think, that it was so ahead of its time.
Well, I write that comment a lot on YouTube. I don't think the ancients were stupid people. The Egyptians could have very well built the pyramids. It didn't have to necessarily come from pre-existing culture. Same with the people in Central America and Mexico. Look, I think they were all smart enough. Well, not all, but the people who engineered that stuff were smart enough to do it. And then you just need a bunch of people willing to work hard to make that project come to life. And then there you go. You have pyramids. There you go. You have a road system. There you go. You know how to divert rivers now. Things like that in the ancient world. But as far as social issues, the people that made the Bible were that clever. They were just that clever. And I find it sad that a lot of people won't take a step back and just look at it.
Right.
Just look at it. There's I've written about this story. I forget where I wrote it, but I went to the Getty Museum not long after it was built. And this is in California, in Los Angeles, California. I'm looking at painting after painting and statues and all this stuff. And I could tell why everything was there. And then I go to this room and there's a bunch of Monet paintings in there. Everything makes sense except for one painting. And I must be 6 or 7 feet away from it, maybe less. And I'm looking at it going, I think this is the first thing I've seen here that's crap. In no way is this impressive. I can barely tell that it's like a picture of a cathedral or something like that. Why would this, it's like next to the haystacks. It's in the room with the haystacks. I'm like, I just don't understand why this is impressive, whatever. So I'm walking away. I'm almost out of the room where this painting is in. And I got the idea, just give it one last look. So I turn around and I look. It was breathtaking. I stood too close to it to get it. How all the colors were there, that really what it was is the way this cathedral looked in the morning with the sun coming up, shining on it, and like part of the purple sky reflecting on it. And it was just breathtaking. how gorgeous it was. And everything else I saw before and after couldn't begin to compare. If it was the 10, nothing else was even a 6 in that whole museum.
Yeah.
But I could be up close to it and thinking I'm trying to immerse myself in this, and I guess it is what it is. And I think that's where a lot of people see their faith, is that it is what it is, but it's glorious. That's where they see it being glorious, because they're in it, right?
Yeah.
Me looking at that painting after I was a distance away is when I saw what it really was. Could anyone standing so close pick up on it the way I could when I was far away? And that's the way I view my criticism of, well, I've studied a lot of religions, a few religions. That's the way I view my criticism of this. Those people are so close, they don't get it in a way that I can, standing at a distance. I can see the beauty of it. I no longer see the brushstrokes, right, for that painting. But with Christianity and Judaism, I do see the brushstrokes, even from across the room. I stood up close to it. As a former writer, I know how to put these kinds of things together. I was in student government. I know how to manage groups of people. I've done it. So when I see that, I'm seeing a process. And I don't know that they still can, right? They don't see it the same process of, let's make people do this. We have to bind people together so that we can have a cohesive society that functions the way we want and benefits us the most. We'll do it by convincing them there's a God that will punish you if you step out of line. What do you guys think? Then the brainstorming starts. And they start writing scriptures to handle all the objections and keep the grift going.
So wait, do you think, Black, that they were grifting from the go? Because I've always attributed it to like just really smart, like, so I think we all know really smart theists, right? Like, even though they may struggle now more than they ever have, but back then I just figured, you know, there were Greeks. I don't know. I never presumed that it was a grift from the go. I always presumed it was just really smart people, and then they kind of just started compiling together, right? Like,
I think.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, you go ahead. You go ahead.
No, man, y'all do your thing. Okay. That was the first time I was like, shit, man, do you think it's all a grift from the get-go?
All right. When I look at the ancient Egyptian religion, a lot of what I heard about it was that they're giving people a system to understand the world, how the universe functions. So if the first priests were scientists, whatever culture, right? People go to the shaman, and the Yanomamo Indians go to the shaman for healing. The shaman knows what to do. In the bush in Africa, they go to the shaman. The shaman is the priest. He's like a priest, a scientist, a social worker. That guy is one of the smartest guys in the society, or at least perceived as such. They know how to fix the problems. They know how to explain things to the people. If the first scientists are trying to teach the people about the world they live in, so what? Maybe they can better take care of it. They come up with allegories. You know, it's antelope. I love saying this. It's antelope and jaguar out on the plain, deciding how to create the rest of the world, deciding how to create people and birds and things like that, right? It's those two putting it all together to give the people an allegory that they could do something with. Only 1 or 2 generations need to pass away for them to think that's really the way the world began. And I think that's what we have in the ancient Egyptian religion. That's what we have in the Bible. At a certain point, A generation came along that didn't understand the symbolism. They didn't accept it as symbolism. It had to be true. It had to be real. No, there really was a talking donkey. No, there really was a talking snake. No, there really was an Adam. They're not people groups. There really was an Eve. It's not a people group. They lose, in my opinion, the value of the story by thinking it's true. Allegory, Jesus taught in parables, right? But isn't a clever way to write a parable to have a character that teaches in parable? One parable after another.
Right.
Right? That proves that teaching in parables is strong. Giving, in a way, I think story problems in math were trying to solve this same problem, trying to help people adjust to math better by giving you a story problem. Okay, you pick the relative data out of the story, and now you solve the problem. Trying to help people, use your mind, the power of your mind, because you're smart enough to get it. But you got to understand what you need to pluck away to solve the problem and what you need to discard, because at this time, that information is not relative to the issue you are trying to resolve. So I think it probably began quite honestly, but at a certain point, it turned into grift. When they saw all that stuff coming into that temple, the Bible has it so the priests are not allowed to own land. Their inheritance is the scriptures, right? It's God, which means they control God. When you have all 12 tribes that are supposed to bring back their tithes to the temple in Jerusalem, how much money do you think they're raking in? You don't need to necessarily have a plot of land here. It's the ultimate welfare system where the entire society, everyone under the Hebrew sun, is walking in 10% of their stuff, whether they're flat broke and they're like that lady who throws in 2 mites into the treasury, or the rich people who buy into it and they're doing it too. As a priest, you're raking in huge amounts of money. You can't even spend it all. When the Romans raided the treasury in Jerusalem, they were able to use a lot of that money to build the Roman Colosseum. Do you mean to tell me that there weren't poor people that could have used that money? Do you mean to tell me that God didn't have some sort of system of, what would it, like on Star Trek with the transporter? All right, priests, it's you're done with your work. It's Tuesday. I need you to put all the gold and sacrifices, or gold and offerings, on the transporter. We're gonna beam it up to heaven because we got to make some more stuff up here. So
those gold streets.
Well, the streets are gold as of clear glass. So they're not gold the metal, they're gold the color. So they invented window tint, I guess, back then. So they could be tacky just like the rest of us now.
Like gold streets, you gotta tint that shit. He's like, wait, this is way too expensive. We're gonna use gold tinted glass.
Gold tinted glass. If you read Revelation, the streets are gold as of glass. It's glass. It's not the metal. So yeah, we clearly know, right? That's not the case. They weren't beaming that gold and the silver that people were bringing, talents of gold, talents of silver. They had to burn like lambs and goats and cattle. And so God, Yahweh in heaven could smell the sweet savor. Really? Really? And yet, by the millions, people bought into it. All that must be true. Oh, I have to bring my tithe in. I have to support the temple. Today, we can see a church fail when there's not enough members to contribute to keeping the lights on, paying the mortgage and stuff like that. We can see a church fail. But when you have millions of people in one religion and they're all supposed to send their money to the same church, right, to the temple in Jerusalem, you're not failing. You're raking in money like crazy. And I think in me studying it, it's kind of like a product of the Babylonian captivity where the rules got changed. And it would be interesting to know if it were first done as a punishment, telling the priests, you can't You can't have a profession other than this. You can't own land, like it's prohibitions. And yet it was the greatest possible gift you could have given those people, because now they can live off the populace without ever having to produce anything other than a really good show.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's what we have now. Joel Osteen. It's a really good show.
Let's try to hit a few more of these questions.
Am I off topic?
We're only on number 3.
Why you think God is real. And failing to find him anywhere would in no way dissuade you from believing in him. I don't believe in God because I see no reason to believe in God. So much of what religion tells us is true, divinely inspired truth that is incontrovertible, has been proven false. Pretty much the entirety of Genesis has been debunked. Everything that is provable to exist is perfectly explainable without adding a God into the equation. And more adequately explained when you consider that if it all was created by a God, that God must have been one hell of an incompetent boob.
And if there was a just and loving God, he wouldn't allow this kind of crap to go down.
Why the shit are the cordyceps from The Last of Us a real thing? Even though they don't affect humans and hopefully never will, what is the reason for something this horrendous? What the hell did the ants ever do to deserve that kind of torment? Why does our laryngeal nerve go from our larynx down around our aorta and then back up to our brain? Why the shit is this a thing?
Candida, a vicious parasite, will swim up the urine into your bowel.
Swim up my what?
Your pinto. It'll swim up your ding-dong, and once it gets in, we can't get it out.
What is the origin of life?
The short answer is that we don't know for sure. But that doesn't mean that we don't have solid hypotheses that are backed up by good evidence for a non-creator-driven emergence of life on Earth. Abiogenesis, the idea of life spontaneously arising from non-living material, is one of the current frontrunners and my personal pick for how life began. The Miller-Urey experiment from back in 1952 proved that the amino acids that make up the simplest forms of early life can and do indeed arise naturally under the proper conditions. It was a rather simple chemistry experiment that used simple ingredients of water, methane, ammonia, hydrogen, and then an electric arc to simulate a lightning strike, and from those wound up creating all of the amino acids that make up the genetic code. More recent experiments have expounded on this work and proven the natural formation of RNA, the more simplistic precursor to DNA, and the more complex genetic sequences that make up all life. It hasn't been conclusively established that this is what happened, but it has certainly been established as a distinct possibility. We know exactly how it would have happened, and that it very
Pocket Locker, I'm hoping you could chime in on this one if you would.
I think they've covered it. I mean, they're doing a pretty good job with this one. And
I know this isn't an evolution
and I
question.
think it just is what happened. I don't even think this is debatable. To me, this is flat earth at this point. We know we evolved. We know life is here. We know we strongly suspect there was a time when there wasn't life. So it's just competing abiogenesis theories in the details. But yeah, I think we should keep going because I think this is this is one of the ones I think they handle rather well. Like, but I guess the main point I'm trying to emphasize is, for me, it's almost non-debatable. Like, it's just what theists are trying to do is create a God of the gaps type argument, but it's a mundane gap. We know there was a history of the planet where there wasn't life. We know you can, just what they said, that we can even experimentally derive all of the natural organic molecules from inorganic chemicals. And now we certainly have evidence of the tree of life that descended. So for those of us that are in reality, I guess what I'm trying to say is it's a far less interesting question than people think it is, in my opinion, once you set aside the dogma that is trying to create a controversy. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Thanks, though. Yeah.
Very well could have happened that way. And this is a hell of a lot more well-supported than the idea that a supernatural being bippity-boppity-booed life into existence with magic.
Right.
There are other ideas of possible origins of life on Earth, such as panspermia, which is the idea that the most basic forms of cellular life were brought to this planet on meteors that struck the planet and effectively seeded it with life. But this really just passes the buck back to the question of, well, where did that life come from?
Right.
But the point is that we have every reason to think life arose naturally with no intelligent direction of the process.
If humans are animals, then where does our sense of justice, where does our sense of morality, where does our sense of what's right and what's wrong come from?
Humans are a social species. Our domination of this planet and the vast and
impressive this one I think is also evolutionary. I just think even within groups, like you have to think not just about between groups. You have to not just think about evolution as affecting individuals, but it works on populations. And so even for societies to thrive and groups to be able to function and not be wiped out by other groups or nature, you just need cooperation. This is, again, another one of those kind of silly issues. Yeah.
Well, I think we can look at the Bible itself and just focus on one character in the Bible, the character of God, right? Fictional character. We can look at his behavior where he looks at the world at the time of Noah, decides, there's this one righteous guy and his family. I'm going to wipe out every other single person on the planet, except for Noah and his family. We'll preserve these 8 people. I'm going to wipe out almost every animal that exists, almost every microbe, almost everything else, plant, tree. I'm even going to move the rocks around a little bit because he's upset. This is his process. Destruction. Don't like those Amalekites. Destruction. Don't like people not believing in my son that Jesus is my kid and that he died for their sins. Destruction. This is his way. In all of fiction that I've come across, there isn't a less moral being than the God of the Bible. Christians will say abortion is wrong. Many, not all. Well, okay, let's go to the book of Numbers where God gives a recipe for a potion that will cause an abortion. But they say he's the paragon of morality, right? His instruction manual, the Bible, tells us what to do. Well, there's a confusion there because it's saying 2 things. All life is precious. Here's how you give somebody an abortion. Okay. There's other issues as well, but just the focusing on where the God of the Bible feels death, mass extinction is deserved, is enough to let you know you don't want this guy solving your problems if he's real. He's just too destructive. It's not a moral way. Hey, here are the rules for selling your child into slavery. No. Can we live in such a way where slavery is not necessary? It's just It's just somebody not doing, and I'm fond of saying this, do your research, because I think it's a hilarious thing to say to people, but they didn't do their research. Anyone who thinks the Bible is a superior moral system to what human beings today can come up with just by having conversations about it, discussing it, is wrong.
Come on, Black.
And
We're
maybe
all
lazy.
slaves to Jesus.
Speak for yourself.
But that's the response. That's their fucking response, is like when you're like, this is awful, and they're like, is it so bad? Aren't we all slaves to Christ? And I'm just like, man. Woo.
Well, look, that person, as you mentioned, they're locked into their perspective. That's it. It's in, you know what it is? It's an atmosphere, if you will. They need to breathe that. If we take it away from them by asking them to be rational and truly like, no, investigate what you're saying to me and do it on a level that makes you uncomfortable. Because when they're pressuring people to study the Bible, they might make you uncomfortable. Look at this. I remember going through First Principles with the Church of Christ and them telling me how Jesus was tortured and all this stuff. And I'm like, try that with me now. I'll have them crying instead of me crying like I was in my First Principles meeting. You know, I was the one who was very emotional and taken aback at the sacrifice that this guy made for me. And now I'm like, yeah, but he only had to suffer for a few hours, and he got up and was walking around in a couple of days.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, but
go ahead.
No, I'm sorry. I know you got time. You guys go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead, John.
Well, there's just this. So a friend of mine sent me a book by a black dude that was giving. It was just an op-ed. You never get any like Dr. Josh Bowens from a Christian. You get the black dude that's a Christian that's giving reasons to white people why slavery was okay in the Bible, or like why that was different.
Yeah.
Why this? And I'm like, okay, I'll trade you. You read this book and I'll read yours. And he said no, flat out. Like, nope, not going to do it. But anyway, that's it goes back to the level of indoctrination, the level of growing up in the faith, and then going to church 3 times a week to get the fucking apologetics that make everything that you guys are talking about today okay, or give an excuse for, or get them to be able to sleep with that book or the terrible things in that book because of, you know, what's really important to them.
Well, Let me tell you, part of marketing, as my professors taught me, the trick is figuring out what people want. There's a second trick, figuring out how to sell what you have to new people. But the real money is being made in figuring out what people want and being one of the early people to give it to them. So that way you can build brand loyalty. You can make all your R&D money back fast, that sort of thing. Well, in today's culture with social media, if you take sort of the less savory side, right? Like the guy you were referring to who thought slavery was just fine in the biblical days. You know, he could justify it. There's a subculture that you can tap into that will pay you money to feed their hatred and insecurities. Just like with politics, we see this in politics, right? Why is this guy who says all these awful things and has all these bad ideas, why is he so popular? It's because there are people who want to believe those things and they will pay him to manage their hatred for him. So for them. So, okay, that guy is in charge of all the things I hate, giving me news about all the things I hate, keeping me up to date so I could keep being a hater. This is fantastic. I don't even have to invest a lot of time in it. Here's $5, here's $10, here's 50. And that's a great modern way.
Yeah, they said that's why Trump was so successful, is because he hated everybody they wanted to hate, or they like he was the voice of hate, that he was the person going something of that nature. What you're talking about.
That's a huge part of it. And I'll add to that was that Trump used the system to his advantage. A lot of the people, when you have a Jordan Klepper interview and you see him interviewing Trump people, where in their mind, you can tell they haven't thought it through. Right? When they say, oh, Biden did this and Hunter Biden did that, blah, 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 blah. But then you give the example from the Trump family. Oh, no. They want to excuse it. Why? Because the truth is they don't actually believe that it's fair for Trump to do it. It's they don't want to look stupid.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, but I didn't want to start politics.
All right. Yeah. Let's keep going. Let's keep going.
It's all politics.
All right.
Society's
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
People love to hate. Sorry, Jay.
Yeah.
I'm
Let's keep going.
interrupting.
Yeah.
Do your thing.
built, the technology we've developed, and culture that we've created all stem from our ability to work collectively and collaboratively with one another. Without that collaborative ability, we would have never moved beyond cave-dwelling hunter-gatherers. We cannot work together if we do not develop a structured framework of rules and ethics that foster positive interactions with one another. Our morals and values come by way of our ability to empathize with one another and our desire to strive for happiness and well-being of one another and the collective as a whole. If we had nothing but a species of self-serving narcissists who always looked to take what other people had, impose their will over the will of others, and cause harm to others so long as we viewed it as benefiting ourselves to do so, we would have evolved to be a solitary creature who eschews association with other human beings except for the purposes of mating and procreation. And then we wouldn't have gotten very far. In fact, given our lack of other physically impressive traits, such as not having thick hides of fur, claws, fangs, or generally greater muscle mass by volume that most animals have over us, if we didn't have the ability to work together, it's likely that we would have gone extinct as a species millennia ago. In short, we're people. People who need people. And those are the luckiest people in the world. Because it is that codependence that has made us so successful as a species. And that simply cannot happen unless we work well together. And we work much better together when we care about each other, and that caring giving rise to a framework of rules that nurtures general well-being. It's evolution. We have evolved our morals.
If you were given irrefutable evidence that the God of the Bible is real, would you become a Christian?
Nope.
That depends on what you mean by Christian. Do you mean, would I believe in...
No.
Yeah, right. Let's hear what he
No,
has
and
to
heck
say.
no. I'd be the guy saying, let's schedule a meeting. We have some things to discuss. You're doing a terrible job.
Yeah, I'm a mesotheist. I don't think God is moral, and demonstrating that the God of the Bible exists would not. Now, yeah. Let's keep going. I'm sure he's on top of this.
And the God of the Bible, and accept that he's real, all powerful, and what he says goes, because he has all the power to do whatever he likes and enforce those rules as he likes? Sure, I absolutely would believe that if I were presented with irrefutable evidence of it. But if instead you mean, would I worship that God and commit my life to his service and his glory? No, not at all. I cannot bring myself to serve at the whim of a cosmic tyrant and what I would view as a moral monster. See, you ask that question from a standpoint of believing not only that your God exists, but that he is the epitome of goodness, love, and righteousness. You see him as the ultimate good guy. So why wouldn't you want to worship him? But what if you were presented with irrefutable evidence that the Christian God did not exist, but in fact there was an ultimate all-powerful deity that did exist, and he was more akin to the devil, a malevolent being who did unspeakably horrible things to humans just because he felt like it. And this being was all-powerful, there was no way around it, what he says goes. Would you want to worship that being? Would you want to serve the bad guy? I would hope not.
Now,
I would
can
hope
you
that
pause it right
even
there?
if you did serve them,
Can you pause it, please? That is a brilliant juxtaposition. It is, because when you look at the world, look at the problems of the world, it appears that's the God that's on hand. If there is a God, that's the one that's taking care of the world right now, that's seeing to the world right now. Let's have nonstop military conflicts. Let's have nonstop poverty, nonstop starvation, nonstop disease, blah, 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 just going on and on. Let's never shut that down. And I'm going to move it around from continent to continent. I just want to see problems, 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 nonstop problems. Instead of, let me take care of these people and provide them with real solutions. I'll give them the ideas. They don't even need to give me credit. I just want to see them prosper. I just want to see them get along. I just want to see what they can do. Instead of, look, if they're able to accomplish this, what won't they be able to do? Let us scatter them and confuse their languages. Because that's how the Bible, the God solves
problems. Yeah.
Things he thinks are problems. He's uncomfortable with it. You know what? I made hell for the devil and his angels, but I'm going to send people who don't believe in my kid there. They'll stop picking on you, Jesus. Thanks, Dad. You're welcome, son. Was the conversation something like that?
Yeah, I don't know. All right, but yeah, we're with you. Let's keep moving.
it would only be out of a sense of self-preservation, and you'd hate every second of it. Well, that's how I view your God. Your God, the God of the Bible, supposedly is all-knowing, with perfect knowledge of everything that will happen. Not what might happen, not what could happen, but what will undoubtedly happen. And in fact, he created everything and everyone to do the very things that they will do. So every supposed sinner is only doing what God created them to do. Free will would be an illusion, because there's no true free will in a predetermined universe where an all-knowing being already knows every choice you will make and made you to make those choices. So your God created every sinner to commit the sins that they cannot avoid committing, and then, for doing what he created them to do, he throws them into hell for all eternity to be mercilessly tortured forever and ever. That is evil. That is the purest evil I can even conceive of. And it is just one reason why, frankly, your God sucks. I could go on and on about the general problem of evil existing in a universe with an all-powerful, all-knowing, all-good deity who could have created a perfect universe with no suffering and still get exactly what he wants out of that universe, but intentionally chose not to. I could talk about the factioning of the religions while he sat by and did nothing to stop it, but will still absolutely punish you if you pick the wrong one, even though it's almost certainly your geography and parentage that determines your religion. On and on we could go about all the ways the God of the Bible does not deserve to be worshipped. And even though I could understand the idea of biting the proverbial bullet and serving that evil God just to spare oneself the torments of hell, I doubt that I could do that. I really don't think I could serve the God of the Bible and still look at myself in the mirror.
Tell me something. If evolution is real, and if evolution is really happening, how come there are no transitional forms that we can observe?
We're all
Take it away,
transitional.
Pocket Locker.
Yeah, we're all transitional forms. I just want to keep it moving. I think we can try to get through this if we keep
world.
No, yeah, but this is a question where the answer is obvious. It's like 2 + 2 is 4. I actually want to end the stream around 5:30, and I literally am going to just repeat the things they say. So let's keep it moving. If they miss something, I'll let you know. But we're all transitional forms. That period. Like that's the answer. That's the answer.
Tons of them, in fact.
Oh my goodness.
I mean, literally everything is a transitional form.
Exactly.
Evolution is a constant, never-ending, ongoing process. We are a transitional form from what we used to be, our Homo habilis, erectus, florensis, Neanderthal, etc. ancestors, transitioning into whatever we will be in a few 100,000 years. I mean, within our own family tree, we see several transitional species from what we used to be to what we are now. But, of course, evolution deniers will insist that these don't count as transitional forms, and they were just different creatures altogether with no evolutionary connection to us. We have examples of transitional forms that link dinosaurs to modern-day birds, showing the clear changes from scales to feathers, limbs to wings, reptile to avid. And yet, evolution deniers will insist that these don't count as transitional forms, and they were just different creatures altogether, with no evolutionary connection to one another. We can chart the evolution of whales and dolphins from terrestrial land animals over time to becoming more and more aquatic, with many, many intermediate forms over the course of 65 million years, from Pachycetus all the way up to modern-day porpoises. And yet, evolution deniers will insist that these don't count as transitional forms, and they were just different creatures altogether with no evolutionary connection to one another. I could go on, because we have literally thousands and thousands of transitional forms all throughout the fossil record. Because everything that has ever lived is a stop along the path from what they were to what they became. But if your ilk automatically insists that nothing counts as a transitional form because you think evolution is fake, then of course you won't believe any transitional forms exist. So it's pretty damn dishonest of you to insist that we produce transitional forms as proof of evolution when you will dismiss all of them as not counting as transitional forms.
Do you live according to what you believe, or do you live your life according to what you lack in belief?
This seems like a malformed question. It's so strangely worded.
Hang on a sec.
Well, go ahead. You got a comment?
Do you live according to what you believe,
or what you lack in belief? I'm immediately reminded of the little engine that could. I think I can. I think I can. I think I can. Immediately reminded of that. What's your thoughts? I certainly have thoughts on
Actually, let's hear what he says and then we'll post, because I don't even. I'm similarly confused with what the Stephen means.
Oh, okay. No,
Yeah.
I'm
according to what you lack in belief.
This seems like a malformed question. It's so strangely worded, right? It's not just me, is it? I mean, I live my life according to many things. Some of the things I do or don't do is based on what I believe in. Some of it is based on what I don't believe in. Much of it doesn't take beliefs into account at all. For instance, I believe it's good and helpful to return my cart to the cart return instead of leaving it sitting next to my parking space. So I return my cart. That's living by a belief. I don't believe in vampires, so I don't walk around with cloves of garlic around my neck. That's living by something I don't believe. I know based on empirical evidence that touching fire will burn me, so I steer clear of sticking my hand in a fire, and belief doesn't enter into it. My ignorance of geometry and spatial reasoning is why I hit the cue ball the way I do, resulting in missed shot after missed shot. So see, some things are based on beliefs, some things are based on lack of beliefs, some things are based on knowledge, some things are based on ignorance. Now, I lack a belief in any god or gods, so I don't pray or attend worship services for the gods that I don't believe in. And when people who do come into power or legislative authority and attempt to force others to comply with their religiously imposed mandates, I speak out against it due to my lack of belief in the thing motivating their oppressive governance. And when fundamentalist Christians find out evolution, something they don't believe in, is being taught in schools, their heads damn near explode. That's acting and living by something they don't believe in.
If God...
Okay, let me jump in on that one. So
yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
I live according to what I believe. The things I don't believe in, that's an interesting take. So I'm going to focus on the first part. Some years ago, I had some friends who fell on hard times. They're really wonderful, generous sisters, and they were living in their cars. And we were hanging out and talking, and they said, "Oh, we're trying to get another place. We should have another place within the next 2 weeks." And I said, "Well, come over to my house, my apartment. You can stay there. I'll give you both keys. You come and go as you please." 2 weeks turned into about 3.5 months of them being there. I did not believe that a God would smile on my two very generous friends and give them a home, someplace where they didn't have to put down a deposit for rent, someplace that wasn't too expensive, that was somewhere in the San Fernando Valley in Los Angeles. That's not what happened. So when they left, they said, "Oh, well, we saved up some money. We wanted to give you a little something because you've been paying all the bills while we were here." And when they gave me the money, I'm like, "I actually don't want your money. I want you two to be okay." And they insisted that I take it, so I did. Who knows what I bought? Some years ago, 3 years ago, probably 3 years ago, next week maybe, someone who I didn't know, who was living in her car, made me aware of her situation. I says, you can stay at my house. You can come and go as you please. So I dropped her off at the airport, or at the bus depot. So she's moving to Texas. I dropped her off at the bus depot yesterday. She lived here 3 years. I told her, "You do not have to pay rent." She says, "Well, what can I do?" I'm like, "Wash dishes, maybe," which she did. I didn't think a God was going to help her out either. The money that I donate to family members or homeless people that I meet, when they tell me, "Oh, thank God," or "God bless you," I says, "No, I bless me. This is as a result of my hard work and generosity. I don't think a God is going to do a darn thing for you, because I don't think there is one." So it's up to people like me, and it's, believe it or not, it's up to people like them too, because when they rise above their situation, they need to look around the world with compassion, and they need to, in my opinion, they need to act on that compassion, as I do. Growing up, I was eating government cheese, eating government rock candy, which is delicious, by the way. I was doing that. I was getting toys from those organizations like Toys for Tots, where they donate toys to poor people and things like that. I've literally said to those people doing that in modern times, "Tell me what you need, and I'm going to go in the store and I'm going to bring it back to you."
Yeah, I mean, that's awesome.
I've done
Yeah.
I've seen the help that I was given, and I don't give a crap about what the people's religions were. That makes no difference to me.
Sure.
I've seen the help that I was given, and none of those problems have been resolved.
Right. So
They're all still problems in society, and so clearly a God is doing nothing about it. Jesus loved the poor.
Right.
Jesus said, "Love the poor. They will always be with you." Why don't you fix that, Jesus? And Jesus is like, "Nah, man."
right.
I'm not fixing any
Let's
of that stuff.
let's hit question number 10, and I want to make sure that we have time to give our concluding thoughts. So
doesn't exist, and the Christian dies, the Christian loses nothing. But if God does exist and you die as an atheist, do you not lose more? Will you not lose your soul?
Okay, so this is Pascal's wager. So first, the notion that if God is not real, the Christian loses nothing. Well, yes, they do. They've lost out on an entire lifetime of proper exploration of what is actually real in the futile pursuit of a divinity that never existed to begin with. They've thrown away much of the one and only life they will ever get in wasted time studying a religion that represented nothing but pure nonsense. And in many cases, were driven to do things that made their life and the lives of those around them fundamentally worse, such as those who shun family members and may have lost out on lifelong relationships with their children because they came out as gay, or people who died prematurely because they got into a car wreck, needed a blood transfusion, but whoops, they were a Jehovah's Witness. So they die at 30 for want of their religious beliefs. You can lose much in devotion to a false ideology. Now, as to what if God were real? The atheist loses everything, but the Christian gains everything. Well, that's only if the God that exists turns out to be the Christian God. You're just as fucked as the atheist if the Islamic God turns out to be real, or any of the other thousands of gods that have been worshipped throughout human history that demand exclusive worship from humans upon pain of eternal punishment and torment if they choose the wrong religion. And here's a mind bender for you. What if all the gods that humans have proposed are all false, but there is an actual all-powerful God who created all of these false religions, but specifically left no conclusive evidence of any of them, in order to see who would glom onto these false religions and who would remain skeptical of them. That God then rewards the skeptics who were not taken in by false beliefs. And all of you religious people who were bamboozled by all the various faiths are judged as unworthy of paradise and cast into hell. In that case, in the event of that God, the atheists gain everything and the religious lose. So your thought experiment only works if the only God that is possible is your Christian God. And that's just Christian hubris at play. If any God exists other than yours, you're just as screwed as everyone else who doesn't follow them.
Hebrews chapter 11 verse 3 says, "By faith we understand that the universe was created by the word of God, so that what is seen was not made out of things that are visible."
I don't care what it says in your holy book.
And from here, he just regurgitates a lot of the standard theist talking points.
All right, yeah, which is all this video is. So for me, I'm just gonna get us going here and just say my takeaway is that these questions are stupid, and they reflect a lot of arrogance and smugness, the way people assume that these are challenges. They also aren't meaningfully questions for atheists. They're really questions for other theists. In other words, they're used to me to really parrot and proliferate talking points. Now, what is very useful about these videos is that these talking points are quite often what run-of-the-mill Christians will ask you, because they've picked up these talking points normally from the pulpit, but if not from apologists. And so you do need to be prepared to answer them. But for people to put them all together and play stupid and act as, oh, I'm just asking questions, I genuinely don't understand how atheists respond to this or that. They typically do, and they just want to encourage other believers to engage in this type of behavior, while maybe also getting the benefit of getting atheists to engage with them in serious conversation.
Well, I think the guy is just trying to make some content like he saw other people do. A sincere and maybe he did this and we just don't see it, is asking atheists who watch his program to reach out to him so that he can interview them and ask them these questions in real time. Then we can see how he responds to the answer. So maybe we want to send him a link to us making this video and give him an invitation. Look, if you'd like to talk to either one of us or both of us,
Right.
we'd be happy to talk to you about, your questions, because maybe he has more than 10, right?
Right.
And if he's just looking to make money off the videos, well, he can make a series then. I'll be glad to talk to him and answer 150 of his questions.
Yeah. Atheists trying to answer my question series.
Yeah. Hey, bro, you got questions. I'll make the time. I'll make the time. My job assignment, I don't have another one immediately. So, ask me this week. So I'll try to find that guy and reach out to him and send him a link to our broadcast.
The channel's called. Oh, you know what? I don't know what the channel's called because we're watching the response video. Let me see. So the original channel.
I'll write it down when you're ready.
Oh, he's responding to Inspired Walk is the name of the channel.
Inspired Walk, yeah.
Yeah, Inspired Walk. Yeah, so that's about as much as I've got. So yeah, I appreciate everybody so much for tuning in. This has just been a great episode. Please don't forget at 9 p.m. Eastern we have our weekly community meeting and gather. So please join us at 9 p.m. Eastern and gather. And we'll sit down and chop it up. Otherwise, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, share the video with other people. Please subscribe to the Casino Theater and Arcade channel for gaming content, and the Hunter Biden's laptop channel for sort of work along, kind of hanging out streams. All those links are down in the description. Also, that's where you can find the links if you want to become a member through Ko-Fi and help sponsor our gather capacity. Appreciate everybody so much. Otherwise, be good to yourselves
and each other.
Until next time, folks.